Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session on automating anti-fraud, secure development, and testing of mobile apps and CI/CD pipelines. If you have any questions during this webcast, please enter them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go along. Now, before we get started, we want to hear a little bit about you so that we can make sure this webcast is tailored to your needs. So for that, we will ask you a couple of questions. First of all, what industry are you in and what is your role? If you could just spend a couple seconds answering that. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you, or half of you, are in, a bunch of you are in financial services, and the others are in other industries. And many of you right now are in security, about 20% security, and then a few in development, and then the rest are in testing QA. So thank you for that. And we will continue now with just our background. Quickly on, I'm Karen. I'm SVP of Mobile DevOps and Security Solutions at Appdome, which automates AI native protections for mobile. I was born near Chicago, but I'm now based in California. Lakshmi, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. This is Lakshmi Mukur, and I've been in the US and Canada for about 12 years now. And I've been a solution engineer with Katalon for about 2 years. And prior to this role, I'm coming from a solution architect, end user, QA field, pretty much done that and the field. So looking forward to sharing the knowledge which we've acquired over a period of time to the rest of the audience. Thank you.
So a little bit background on us so you have an understanding of our perspective. So Appdome provides AI native protections for mobile. That means protections for Android, iOS, plus mobile enabled devices, AR, VR, point of sale devices. And we protect over 1 billion users around the world. And those users are using one or more of our 400 different anti-fraud and security protections. Lakshmi, you want to give a little intro about Katalon?
Sure. So from Katalon perspective, as the name suggests, right, it's an all-in-one test automation platform where you'd be able to automate your web API, mobile, and certain desktop applications under a single window, under a single license. So the whole purpose of developing Katalon is to make sure you are able to run tests with more flexibility and make sure that you're able to satisfy and meet the demands of go-to-market at a faster pace.
Great. So why are we here today? Well, we're in a mobile first economy, and that means 90% of people's time is digital time is on mobile apps as opposed to the internet. And what that means to the mobile business is 93% of mobile users will advocate for those that protect them. So for mobile app makers, this means your users are going to write recommendations if they know you are protecting them. And this is based on a survey that Appdome puts out every year, and I'm happy to share that with you if you're interested. Now, conversely, 73% say they will churn if there is an exploit. And that is where attackers are coming in very quickly, using AI to create attacks that are more sophisticated, faster than faster than ever before. And they're using newer techniques. They're using deep fakes, for example, and scams, social engineering scams that we'll double click on. So these attackers are using AI to spawn thousands of deepfake attacks. If you've used Face ID, you can see that attackers are able to intercept this facial recognition or biometric recognition process. They're able to spoof images, inject images. They're able to use deepfake videos. So basically what that means is as you're logging into your app, the attacker can swap out your image for theirs so they can get in and use your app. They're using deepfake videos, inserting deepfake videos in the facial recognition process, doing camera substitution, and manipulating images. So what does that mean to companies? Well, companies are responding, and they're responding with point solutions. Now, the challenge with these point solutions is if they're using a authentication solution, a biometric authentication solution, and they're using a fraud detection solution, and they're using a bot defense solution. In mobile, these point solutions often runs asynchronously, unlike cloud-based applications. And that leads to conflicts, security conflicts, and crashes. And that means customers then end up with poor experiences. So since I use a lot of mobile apps, I spend a lot of time reading reviews, and I've noticed a trend over the last few months where a lot of end users have been complaining about the login process or being logged out or being stopped in some part of their workflow. And that challenge is disruptive. And what's needed, and we'll talk about today, is a different approach, a scalable end-to-end platform approach that eliminates these conflicts, but and creates great user experiences. So, what do we mean by that? That means being able to automate delivery, turning on the defenses that you need without having to refactor each defense when you do that, automate the testing of the secured app with the anti-fraud protections, and Lakshmi will go into that in more detail, as well as automating threat management. So looking out into the future, seeing when the app is in production in the wild, what new attacks are happening on the app and how you can automate your defenses against them. So what do we mean by customizing the user experience? So what we mean is when a security event happens, you can customize the response and you can customize it based on the severity of the threat. So on the left-hand side, what you see is a case where, an example where you have detected the use of Magisk or some similar tool. And so in this case, the app will close, but there's information here you can provide to say, here is the support number you need to call, here's the reference number you need to tell that support person so they can get you back to using your app as quickly as possible. All the way to the far right-hand side, where you see another example where the user is presented a similar message about the use of Magisk, but in this case, what they can do is upgrade to a safe banking solution or another solution that allows them to continue to use the app with additional monitoring, with additional management and protections. So what you have now is the flexibility of not only seeing what the threat attack vectors are specifically when these mobile attacks happen, but also how to respond and control that response depending on the user and your app. So what we're going to talk through is how to use AI to accelerate the development. And that means every part of this process here, uh, starting with being able to use AI to create hundreds of defenses in your app. So that means stopping AI API abuse and API-based attacks, being able to extend your WAF to protect from mobile threats and attacks, protect your mobile endpoints, and ensure a greater user experience, like we just talked about before. But it also means using AI to stop all deep fake attacks on mobile. So stop image manipulation, prevent deepfake video injection, prevent Face ID bypass and deepfake and face swaps, prevent camera app substitution. It also means stopping fraud, whether that's account takeovers, where there's credential stuffing, or the use of on-device malware, where there's identity theft. So attackers are using different methods to get the login and credential information, whether it's using overlays or keyloggers and spyware. And it also means preventing transaction takeover. So preventing on-device malware that may be taking over a user session and making changes to the transactions. We're also looking at and preventing the other issues around fake clicks and keystrokes where the attacks are used to simulate real users entering information in, as well as faking their location. And this is critical for a number of banking, financial services, and other apps that rely on the location to allow a user to complete their transactions. And so after you've added these protections in an automated way, you need to use AI to automate the testing. And this is where I'll hand it over to Lakshmi to talk to us a little bit more about the challenges with automating testing.
For sure. Thanks, Karen. Even before going deeper into this slide, right? Let's look at it from a functional testing and a non-functional testing perspective. So from non-functional testing world, you always bring in performance, security, vulnerability, like fraud prevention, security protections. All of this fall under that specific category. And when you look at functional part, you would see that the automation testing, which is a very core part of your functional testing, has to have hand in hand practice with your security testing. So when you go to your production, you have everything within your pipeline and automated to form a proper flow. So let's look at what the use case of AI in automation testing. The first most important part is to make sure you use Studio Assist. I'll go through that during the quick demo which we have. It's making sure that you ensure your compatibility part to make sure your apps run seamlessly on any OS or any mobile device. That's the great thing with mobile devices. And as the screenshot rightly shows, the number of devices grow every single day. In fact, every single hour, and there is a new development, new deployment of a new device with a new screen resolution, and everything changes with your script as well. And most important part is you need to test without interruption. At the same time, your functionality should never be compromised. So the security part is extremely important before you go to your production. So is the functional aspect of it, where you combine the security aspect along with it as well. And the ultimate goal of doing all this is to make sure you're able to accelerate your release. And as I mentioned before, you want to bring all of this within your CI/CD platform. Next slide, please.
Yes. And just to add to what you said there, Lakshmi, what we've seen from a lot of customers is the fact that with security, with automation tools, there are oftentimes specific tools like emulators, for example, that are used in test automation that will trigger security features because hackers, fraudsters will also use emulators and simulators in their attacks. So making sure that you can continue using the test automation tool is important.
Absolutely. So let's see what Catalan does with respect to AI and mainly with respect to automation testing from a mobile area. So consider Katalon to be Appium on steroids. That's a very nice way to put it, and that's how my reps from Katalon always phrase it. So it's primarily used to leverage your user-friendly keywords with it within a well-known framework such as Appium. And as I mentioned before, when you have like your Copilot for automation testing, which is Studio Assist for Katalon, residing within your application, it's going to speed up your automation creation process. The next part is optimal your cross-functional testing. The pre-built keywords is going to make things seamless, where you don't need to worry about creating the framework. Rather, you focus on automation part itself. And once you have your anti-fraud and your security protections installed within your application, you have the core, the bread and butter available for you to play around with it within the automation space. So that app, after it passes through Appdome, would be taken into the purview of Katalon, and we'd be able to use your effortless testing methodologies to generate your test cases with your mobile recorder, or you would even be able to create it with simple prompts and have a complete flexible environment. As Karen rightly pointed out before, you wouldn't be able to do everything in an emulator. Of course, emulator would be an easier option to get started. You can have Android SDK installed, or you'd be able to use the similar version of iOS installed on your machine. But the biggest challenge is testing it on actual devices itself. That is where you bring in Test Cloud, which is also a component within Catalan, where we host the actual devices for you, and the application which is obtained from Appdome is going to be put into Katalon, get your test cases created, and then passed on to your actual devices. And everything is going to work seamlessly on your end-to-end pipeline, which is what we're going to see shortly.
Yes, and that's the really cool thing about what we'll share is that you can use your test environments the way you want to, because Appdome is built with Katalon a plugin so that we recognize when Katalon is being used for testing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But let's say now you have completed your testing, like Lakshmi talked about, and your app is now out in the wild. At this point, your customers, your end users may be facing new attacks and threats. And this is where the support team that they go to need to be able to help them, or the end users themselves need to figure out quickly how to resolve the threats so they can get back to using the app. Now, as many of you have probably tried different LLMs, this process of getting that information around the step-by-step instructions, and support teams in general may be finding it challenging to get consistent responses. Now, this is where Appdome has built out the technology to support these end users so that the different threats and attacks, to whether it's on a particular device or OS or other system, is and results in consistent step-by-step instructions for the end user to quickly get back to using the app. And also, while the app is out in production, it's critical to be able to see where the new attacks are coming from, how fast they're coming, and what to do next. This is where Appdome offers the ability to benchmark your mobile business risk. So that means being able to compare how apps are doing against each other, but also more importantly, how your company and how your apps are doing compared to others in the industry. And then in this way, with the largest set of industry data around mobile specifically, we're able to show you what and how you compare, and look at the infection rates for apps within your industry, within your company, and be able to analyze and understand the impact of providing and adding new defenses and knowing which defenses to add next. And so at this point, I want to switch gears and go through a demonstration, and show what we've been talking about. So going back to the very beginning, you have, or your development team has committed changes, and they may be using a SaaS tool, a static application security a testing tool, to see where vulnerabilities are and address those early. What's important though is while doing that, it's important, and we've worked with a lot of organizations around being able to pen test and really see where the missing defenses are in the app as it's running. And Appdome provides these different assessments, not as part of our business, but as a courtesy, as an upon request. And so you would see, as an example, a part of this test, or this pen test results would be being able to see if the app had deepfake detection, or if the app could detect a fake location. And these are all particular defenses that we're looking for in the mobile app. And if those are not there, then the ramifications and the impacts are the check marks that you see on the right. So is that could not having these different defenses means then risk of account takeovers, credential stuffing, data breaches, and so forth. So what's needed is a way to automate remediation, because there's so many different defenses that are required. There's so many attacks that are coming in fast and more sophisticated than before. And so the way to build in these protections in an automated way to automate this remediation is by using Appdome. And so what I'm going to do is show you how this platform works. So just to orient you to this platform, we're a cloud-based tool, and you would first start by uploading the app, whether it's an IPA, AAB, APK file, or your SDK. And once you have the app uploaded, you can then add those protections in. And so what you see on the left-hand side here are the apps, many of our customers. And so I'm going to select one of the apps and be able to, and now begin building these protections in. So it's simply a matter of, like we talked about before, being able to add the protections in that you need. So say you need to add Face ID bypass, and be able to detect for Android apps, biometric prompt exploits, or detect when there's camera exploits. You can also use Appdome to protect from any number of 400 different anti-fraud and security attacks. So those include, as we talked about before, voice cloning in terms of social engineering, preventing vishing, or the use of video calling, or a voice calling while you're using the app, because that leads to a lot of attacks that we've seen, preventing screen sharing scams and other types of scams, as well as different fraud type of attacks, related fraud, such as, like we talked about before, keystroke injection, the use of overlays. And when you are finished with picking the different protections that you want, the different security features that you want, and it's just a matter of hitting build my app or calling the API. Now, everything that I'm showing you can be done via API call. I'm just, for the purposes of this demonstration, showing you the GUI. Now, the protections that I have selected, or that you have selected, are all tied together with what we call a fusion set, which is that security configuration. That security configuration has an ID, and the reason why I bring this up is I just want to point it out so that later on you remember it in the next part of the demo that we do within the CI/CD pipeline. So when you have picked the protections that you want and you now want to build those in, it's a matter of simply calling the API, build my app, or if you want to build a test version, like we talked about, you can select which test version you want to build for, in this case, Katalon, and select that and build it. But when you build the app, what the Appdome platform is doing is using the AI technology that we have to add the protections in. But to do that, we first look at the frameworks used in the app, the libraries that are in the app, the dependencies, and we look at the protections that need to be added against the features and the characteristics of the app, and add those protections in the most optimal way. So what this means is we are not changing the source code. We are adding to the app binary. We're adding security plugins, and we have thousands of security plugins that will add to the app based on your security objectives, and those are added to the app, which you can then build in on a regular process, whether it's multiple times a day or thousands of times a month for some of our customers as they have many different apps. And so as we go through this process, uh, the the GUI here is showing you everything that Appdome is doing. And everything that you're seeing here in the GUI is also reflected in the log file. So you are able to see what is going on throughout the process. And at the end of the process, you will get two artifacts. One is the secured app, which is the secured APK, IPA, AAB file, and also a certified secure document. Now, at this point, in the time that we just talked about what Appdome does in the platform, you can see that protections have been added. It's now simply a matter of going through and signing the app and then uploading it to the appropriate app stores. But what I want to do is show you the certified secure document so you can see that we indeed have added the protections that we said we would. In this case, it's the deepfake detection, Face ID bypass prevention, and also with every app, you get anti-debugging, anti-tampering, and other protections that are fundamental to protecting and shielding the app from attacks. So in the time that we took to present this, you can see how easy it is for companies like yours to not only build the secured apps for production, but build throughout the entire development lifecycle and ensure that the apps are secured and can stop fraud. So after you have added the protections in, it's important to test that the apps work as expected functionally. And this is where, like we talked about before, we have the ability to create a specific version for Katalon, which is using our build to test plugin. And the way this plugin works is that it has an Appdome trust model, which recognizes when Katalon or any other mobile app testing suite is being used and allows the automated testing to continue without interruption. And in this service, Appdome logs all the security events and fraud events triggered so developers can track and monitor everything that's going on throughout the QA test and release cycle. And you're also able to see and visualize this data in another product called ThreatScope, which we'll show you at the end. But at this point, what I want to do is hand it over to Lakshmi so he can show you how to do the AI-driven automated testing.
Thank you, Karen, for such an insightful information on how to add your protections and how to make sure that your app is secure, or how can we actually make sure that your app is ready to get tested. So here is where the testing window comes into picture, right? So now we have a dedicated build which Appdome has built for us kind enough to make sure that we have it ready for us to get started with our automation journey. So for people who have actually seen automation or actually played around with automation testing solution, you would know that Katalon is a robust tool which works with your mobile API, web, and your desktop applications. Here, our primary focus is going to be around the mobile aspect of things. So I've got a very basic sample script. Even before going into the script, I'll quickly give an overview of what Katalon Studio is. So you've got your basic integrations with your source code repository, any Git-based source code repository. You have an option to spy your objects. You have an option to record your objects on your application, basically create things from end-to-end process. And the 10.1, which is our latest and greatest version, has got a new addition to it, which is AI. Again, if I don't talk about AI, or if we don't talk about AI, technically the day isn't complete. So we are in that world where AI plays a vital role in our day-to-day lives. So let's look at how AI itself is going to help you with creation of this automation test case at a faster pace. So you'd be able to click on this record icon. Benefit of time, I'm not going to go too deep into the recording aspect of it. Of course, I'll be able to take questions or schedule an offline demo call specifically around functionalities of Katalon Studio itself. So once you're able to record your application, this is how your recording would look like. So you start your application. Here is where I point to my APK file from Appdome, which they've added the necessary protections on top of it. And I would start playing around with my application. I start performing actions such as tap, what you would do in your typical application. This is a very sample application, like a food order application where you try to go in, find an order like a Swiggy or like a Uber Eats. You'd be able to go in, find your item of choice, add it to your cart, basically pay, make sure you pay and then get out of your system. So the same thing is what you're going to be doing here. Here, you as soon as you add to cart, what you notice is the user isn't signed up. So they'll be clicking on the sign up icon, entering your username and password, like a dummy username and password, entering all the required credentials, and finally you'd be able to make sure you can exit out of your application. So you can see that there is a 17th step which I added, which is not really part of the script. This is just to show that the number of web UI or number of mobile keywords which are pertaining or which we have developed within Katalon. And this is the key differentiating factor, right? As I told, Katalon for mobile is basically Appium on steroids. So instead of you writing your keywords from scratch, these are the standard keywords that are going to be existing for your mobile specific, like including take screenshot, use fingerprint, verify checkpoint, pretty much multiple different actions on your mobile keyword, which will make sure that your end-to-end mobile application testing, be it iOS or Android, is readily available. So with respect to recording, there are going to be three different options. One is you'd be able to record it directly on your emulator devices. But if in case emulator is a strict no from your organization perspective, you'd be able to connect your actual devices itself onto your monitor, or you have your own device lab. You can connect to that device lab. The third option is you would be able to connect to Katalon Test Cloud, where we host the devices for you, latest and greatest version of Samsung's or Apple's or anything which launches. We have the latest version in our lab, and you get to have like a shared device if in case you want to share it with other organizations, which basically ends your data when you close your session, or you'd be able to get your own dedicated devices as well, depending upon the type of application and the type of testing you perform. On Studio Assist side, as you see, even you giving a simple prompt on what are some of mobile keywords which I could use in my script to make my script more robust, it gives you a complete idea on what are these things available. Consider this to be like your own version of Copilot for Katalon Studio. So you would be able to understand what Katalon Studio can offer with your Studio Assist residing or standing right next to you to assist you to make sure your scripts are more robust. So this is what it looks like from an automation creation perspective. The next part, which I would be spending a couple of minutes on, is your test suite part. So when talking about Katalon, one thing which I always tell is we are CI/CD agnostic solution. When I tell agnostic, why I mean agnostic is because doesn't matter which CI/CD tool you are going to be using, you would have an option to bring in that specific command which is generated from Katalon Studio and insert it into your YAML file. So you get to control on the command which is required. Say, for example, I've added an iOS app and an Android app here. I'm going to click on this specific command editor part. And as soon as I choose the type of version where I want to execute it, like your test cloud on any phone and your type of profile, you'd be able to generate this command. This command is what I would give to my DevOps engineer, or if in case I have my own pipeline access, or Karen is going to be showing this as well, right? Like you can actually copy this command and parse it onto your YAML file, which is going to be part of your entire CI/CD platform itself. So you get that control over what you want to execute and not just leaving security testing behind or automation testing behind. Here is where you combine both of them into a single window and get your testing completed before you go to production. Over to you, Karen.
Okay, great. Thank you. And before we continue to the next part, which is pulling this all together in the CIDC pipeline, like Lakshmi ended, I just wanted to ask the audience here what CIC you use, and that way we can tailor the next part of the demo. So do you use a CIC platform? If so, which one? And then do you automate your testing today? And do your developers manually code the security and fraud prevention features, or they use SDK? So if you could just respond to that, it'd be great so we can customize the next part of the presentation. Okay. So it looks like most of you do use a CI/CD, and that's great and helpful. And most of you use some kind of um, automation testing tool, uh, and uh, and most of you do not manually code security or fraud prevention features in. So okay, so great. So now I'm just going to switch over and share the next part of our presentation where we're tying together the different CI/CD tying together everything that we showed you in the CI/CD platform of your choice. So many of you are using one of the many different CI/CD platforms that are listed here below. Um, I've talked to companies who have created their own CI/CD custom CI/CD platform, and regardless of the CD platform you use, the process is very similar. And so for today, I'm going to use Azure DevOps, but we also have videos that I can provide you on all the other platforms that you see here. So in Azure DevOps, you have a marketplace where you can find the Azure DevOps extensions. If you look up Appdome, you'll find the Appdome plugin. You'll also find the Katalon extensions, or the Appdome extension and the Katalon extension. And when you are in your pipeline, this is where now you can customize that pipeline. And in this pipeline, what you see is the build to secure extension that we talked about before, we saw before in the marketplace. And um, in this part of the pipeline, you can customize, you can configure the pipeline to use the Fusion Set ID, to use the security configuration that we talked about before. Now, you can also add to this pipeline and add the Katalon extension that Lakshmi was talking about. And like Lakshmi was talking about earlier, you can go to the YAML file and add that piece that Lakshmi was talking about. So you can then use the test that you want in this pipeline and for every app that you want to test in this way. So now I'm not going to run this right now, but now you can run this and get at the end of the process the same things that we looked at before. I ran this yesterday or earlier today, and um, and you will get the same things that we saw before at the end of the process after you have added the protections in and after you've tested and you've passed the testing. You can now see that you get the secured, in this case, APK file, but you could also similarly get a secured IPA or AEB file and the certified secure document, which shows you all the protections that have been added by who, when, and any changes to the app. So what you get out of this process, this end-to-end process, is a way of automating the entire security, fraud prevention that's needed for the app, along with functionally testing the app so that everything works as expected after the security and fraud prevention is put in. And now you're able to, as the app is in production, in the wild, continue to monitor, continue to manage new threats and attacks. And for this, what I'll go over and show is the Appdome Threat Scope product. And this is where, going back to the Appdome platform, you can see this dashboard here, which allows you to, for this demo account, be able to see where the attacks are coming from, which type of attacks are coming from which parts of the world, and the number of them. And and so if you take, for example, this demo app, you can see there are attacks coming from all different parts of the world. You can see the attacks by the defenses that are working, defenses that are in the app currently, and you can also see the new threats and the new attacks. And when you double click on these new threats and attacks, you can see where the new threats are coming, where the new threats are coming by the app, by the operating system, and by device. And you can then even double click down to the specific type of attack. And so we were talking about fraud detection as an example, and account takeovers. And within account takeovers, you can see key logging is a big issue. So now you can go back to your app and then go to building the protections in. And for account takeovers, um, uh, and the features that we talked about here, you can then add in these features. Oops, sorry. Add in these features here, for example, for key logging, and simply turn that feature on. And you can customize the experience for the end user when you have that feature detected. So you can say, now I want to uh, have in-app defense, which means the app will close but send this message here, telling the user to call a 1-800 number or call support with this reference number. Or you can customize experience so that the app responds in the way the developer wants to respond to this particular event, given the different characteristics of this security threat. And so what this allows you to do is to see at any given time what the different attacks are, but also all the characteristics of the attack and that attack vector. So what was the OS that was used, what was the device model, the latitude, longitude of that attack, and provide that granularity of information, that visibility that is needed so that you can respond in the way that you need to. So at this time, I'm just going to head over to some of our case studies and wrap this up before we go into Q&A. The last thing I just want to share is, in addition to what I showed you before about being able to see where the attacks are and how to manage those attacks, we have the benchmark, the Appdome Mobile Benchmark risk score here, and you can measure your risk by app. So compare the apps against each other, but also compare your company's risk score against others in the same industry, and therefore know where you are and what you need to do next. You'll also be able to see how fast the attacks are going, look at the infection rate, and give you the insight you need to know what to do next. In terms of a couple of case studies, so one of our customers is a joint customer that we have with Katalon. This company is being used in the Asia Pac region. It's one of the largest payment apps in the world. It is a super finance app that lets you pay, load, and invest. In this customer, we are using Katalon with GitLab as a CI/CD, and for this customer, we are helping them to protect their apps from social engineering malware and other fraud. So this is a very fraud-focused solution that we have for them. We're also working with them and have supported them to optimize their WAF, um, their current WAF, and really through our WAF partner, protect their APIs, protect their mobile endpoints by building these protections in through the mobile app and enabling them to optimize, extend their WAF to handle mobile threats and attacks without having to add on, buy more um, web application firewalls. So in this way, they are able to automate their AI native protections for fraud prevention and other security attacks and eliminate, in their case, the risk of operational issues and unauthorized transactions because they're a payments app. And with Appdome, they're able to continuously detect, manage new threats and attacks. Another case study I just want to share with you is FIS. FIS is using Appdome with Bitrise as a CI/CD, and they're using Appdome again to stop fraud and AI-driven attacks, but more specifically to protect against tampering and changing of the app. Many organizations have apps that can be found in third-party app stores, and this is scary because hackers, fraudsters can take that app and add to it. What Appdome prevents is tampering with the app so that can happen. So in that way, prevent a number of different types of malware for being added and other exploits. Now, with the shift left sort of industry change and mantra, um, a lot of organizations have seen pen testing create too many remediation tasks for engineering. What Appdome can do is clear that backlog and make sure that you can not only protect against all the AI-driven attacks, but resolve and remediate the issues right away. So at this point, what we want to do is just ask you to join us and do a live workshop. So everything that we showed you today, everything that Lakshmi and I showed you today, we can do with you, with your team, hands on keyboard, in a live workshop. And in that workshop, we'll go through the mobile app development in your CI/CD of choice. We'll discuss an assessment of your particular app that we can do for you. And then together we can build the mobile apps that prevent fraud, that stop the security attacks, and automate the testing that Lakshmi showed you earlier with Katalon. And so in this interactive hands-on session, which we can schedule right away, just let us know. We'd like to work with you on seeing how this can work for your mobile apps. And in this way, you can ensure that every app is secured, has the fraud prevention in it that is needed, and is tested in an automated way every time you do a build, every time you do a release. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to do our final, before we go into questions, go into our final Q&A here. I see some questions here. Is there any chance we can get a copy of the recording? And yes, we can do that. And is Appdome related to Datadome? No, we are different companies. Now I'm just going to send out our last polling question. So would you like to follow up with us? And, it could be with Appdome or Katalon or both. And was this webcast useful? So as you guys are responding to that, that's great. So it looks like many of you want to follow up with actually both of us. So we'll definitely do that and follow up with you. And so let's shift over to some of the questions. I'll start off with some of the questions that came in for Katalon first. And and that is, what are the biggest challenges that teams face when implementing mobile test automation compared to web testing?
Awesome. That's a really good question. So primarily with mobile testing, the biggest uh, problem or biggest roadblock which you have is because you have number of different manufacturers and multiple different OS versions. Web testing is far more straightforward. You have directly your either Windows, Mac, or your Linux-based machines. And also another thing with mobile is that you have a lot of uh, things to do with respect to battery, your memory, even your gesture-based interactions, or even like your app lifecycle states. Like there are so many things before you get into the mobile testing space, which you need to look into. And unlike web testing, you might target a few browsers to ensure that your application is stable enough. Say if you will know which browser your maximum percentage of your end users are actually using. But for mobile, you need to be way more strategic when you think about the cost involved with different approaches. That is where Test Cloud is going to help you, where we host the devices. At the same time, you need to make sure your testing is completely efficient. So, very good question, and I hope I was able to answer that.
Yeah, that's great. And so another question that came up was, how do you recommend handling testing across both native apps and mobile web interfaces?
Okay. That is again a very good question, right? The most common problem which everyone faces with respect to the hybrid approach. So the most important part is first clearly defining your test strategy on each platform based on your user journeys, on who's using what, how do I want to test it. Are people using mobile browser or they prefer to use mobile app? You get complete idea around that. If they are using native apps, focus on your core automation functionalities, user flows that have your native capabilities, and for mobile web, prioritize on your responsive web design testing so that even if the screen size alters, you are able to ensure that the functionality is not affected. So you create a unified framework that can basically switch between your testing contexts, but at the same time, keeping your test cases separate to avoid the complete complexity. So you have the control on your side to decide which side I need to go on. And of course, both needs to be prioritized, and that's where your automation gets stronger.
Okay, great. And now a couple questions for Appdome. So, how does Appdome prevent fraud? So, Appdome prevents fraud by stopping the methods and the tools that fraudsters use to commit that fraud. So, in terms of transactions, like we talked about before, that means Appdome stops fraudsters from doing account takeovers, from bypassing Face ID and spyware. So, for Face ID, attackers use deep fakes to pretend to be their victim, and they could be spoofing these images and intercept and modify the camera. So Appdome detects when an attacker is trying to spoof and stops that. So uh, another question about for Appdome is, how does I understand you have an anti-bot solution, but how does that work? So Appdome allows you to deploy one bot defense solution across any web application firewall and all WAFs. So this way you don't have to change or roll out new WAFs to get the anti-bot functionality. You can just extend the functionality of your existing WAF. And that means, as part of this Appdome's API defense, you can rate limit the connection requests to the mobile device to APIs. You can also get threat data on over 400 different threat vectors, so you can understand the fraud, scam, and account takeover risk that you have. We also provide MTLS pre-authentication and other features that I'm happy to share with you after this call, and some more specific details for your development team. So one more question on for Katalon. This is around, what's your approach to handling test flakiness in mobile automation specifically?
Again, a very good question, right? So, with respect to test flakiness, the key consideration to look into is your performance variability and how your network conditions affect your tests, basically. So I found success in implementing multiple different practices while I was a practitioner, basically using multiple products for my mobile testing area. So using smart waits, technically adapt or wait for your elements to be loaded, doesn't matter with respect to which network condition or which specific area we're going to be focusing on. And also, most important part is you monitoring your test execution times. That can also help you identify your performance degradation while you do your automation testing. Technically, this is not applying load on the system. Consider this to be more of like a single user test on your system. So your app's performance is well evaluated even before going into the non-functional zone or the performance zone.
Okay, great. Uh, so at this time, I want to thank you for all of your time today. We appreciate, we know we're all in busy schedules, and thank you very much for your time. We'd love to hear from you. So please reach out to us. We will respond to all of you who registered with our email, so you can contact either Lakshmi or myself. And we look forward to your questions, your comments, and to continue this discussion on our journey together in this space. So thank you all for your time and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.